Stress is often thought of as an invisible force that lives only in our minds, but in reality, it exerts a profound and measurable impact on the heart. While many of us may dismiss stress as merely a mental burden, research from both psychology and cardiology reveals that prolonged stress acts almost like a slow-acting toxin on the cardiovascular system. Robert Sapolsky, in his groundbreaking book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, explains that humans, unlike zebras, don't have the luxury of switching off their stress response after a single acute threat. Instead, our bodies endure chronic stressors, work deadlines, financial pressures, family conflicts, leading to sustained release of stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones, while life-saving in short bursts, become destructive when constantly present, causing increased blood pressure, arterial inflammation, and even the thickening of arterial walls over time. The physiological consequences of chronic stress are astonishing. Studies show that individuals exposed to continuous stress have higher rates of hypertension and are significantly more likely to develop atherosclerosis, a condition in which plaque builds up inside the arteries, increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes. The link between the mind and heart is not abstract, it is visceral. The autonomic nervous system, which regulates involuntary bodily functions, reacts to mental states in ways that can accelerate or decelerate heart disease progression. Chronic stress triggers a sympathetic nervous system response, commonly known as fight or flight, that elevates heart rate and blood pressure, creating wear and tear on the cardiovascular system known as allostatic load. Psychologists like Irvin D. Yalom have repeatedly emphasized the existential dimensions of stress. In Existential Psychotherapy, Yalom discusses how the awareness of life's uncertainties and mortality can produce a chronic psychological strain that manifests physically. This perspective helps explain why two individuals with similar lifestyles might experience very different cardiovascular outcomes. The subjective experience of stress, the internal narrative, and the unresolved emotional conflicts all play a role. It's not merely the external events that matter, but how the mind interprets and internalizes them. People who ruminate, worry excessively, or struggle to cope with life's uncertainties inadvertently maintain a constant state of physiological arousal that damages the heart over years. An illustrative example comes from longitudinal studies on workplace stress. Employees who report feeling consistently undervalued, overwhelmed, or trapped in high-demand roles exhibit a markedly higher incidence of coronary heart disease. One classic study, the Whitehall 2 study, demonstrated that lower-ranking employees, even when controlling for traditional risk factors like smoking or obesity, had substantially higher rates of heart disease, largely due to psychological stress and lack of control. This finding underscores a crucial point. Stress is not a trivial inconvenience. It is a measurable, lethal risk factor for cardiovascular health. The relationship between stress and heart disease also intersects with behavioral patterns. Chronic stress often encourages coping mechanisms that are themselves harmful to the heart, including smoking, overeating, and alcohol consumption. However, even in individuals who maintain ostensibly healthy lifestyles, the silent physiological effects of stress can progress unnoticed. Elevated cortisol, for example, not only affects metabolism and fat distribution, but also interferes with the immune system and contributes to systemic inflammation, a core driver of cardiovascular disease. Sapolsky notes that humans often accumulate stress scars, the cumulative effect of unrelieved tension that over decades predisposes the body to disease in ways that are invisible until a major cardiac event occurs. Beyond the physiological, there is a psychological narrative to consider. When individuals perceive their stress as unmanageable or view themselves as helpless in the face of life's challenges, the cardiovascular risk intensifies. Martin Seligman's work on learned helplessness and positive psychology illuminates this connection. The subjective experience of being trapped or powerless correlates with higher stress biomarkers, including elevated heart rate variability and cortisol levels. In practical terms, this means that not all stress is equal. Stress interpreted as a challenge can be adaptive, while stress internalized as a threat to well-being accelerates cardiac risk. Modern interventions increasingly recognize the necessity of addressing both mind and body. Mindfulness practices, meditation, and cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, have been shown to reduce not only perceived stress but also physiological markers such as blood pressure and heart rate. Jon Kabat-Zinn, in Full Catastrophe Living, illustrates how mindful awareness and deliberate focus on the present can dampen the fight or flight response and restore balance to the autonomic nervous system. When applied consistently, these practices may reverse some of the cardiac damage associated with chronic stress, emphasizing that mental health interventions are not merely ancillary, they are essential for heart health. In sum, stress is far from a trivial or isolated mental issue. It is a dynamic force that interacts with the body, reshaping arteries, altering metabolism, and creating conditions ripe for cardiovascular disease. By understanding this connection, individuals can begin to see stress management not as a luxury, but as a life-saving intervention. Psychological insight, mindful awareness, and behavioral change together form a powerful defense against the hidden dangers of stress. As Sapolsky so vividly reminds us, the subtle tyranny of unrelieved stress can quietly erode the body over decades. Yet with conscious awareness and deliberate practice, the trajectory of both mind and heart can be redirected toward health and longevity. Depression is often perceived as a purely emotional or mental health challenge, something that affects thoughts, mood, and social interactions, but rarely is it recognized for its profound impact on the heart. Yet decades of research in both psychology and cardiology reveal that depression is a powerful risk factor for cardiovascular disease, influencing everything from inflammation and platelet function to heart rhythm and lifestyle behaviors. Andrew Solomon, in his seminal work The Noonday Demon, captures the pervasive and consuming nature of depression, emphasizing that it is not simply sadness, but a complex interplay of emotional, cognitive, and physiological processes. This multidimensional view helps explain why individuals with chronic depression are significantly more likely to experience heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular complications. The physiological link between depression and heart disease is multifaceted. Depression triggers a cascade of biological responses that strain the cardiovascular system. For instance, individuals with depression often exhibit elevated levels of inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein, CRP, and interleukin-6, both of which contribute to atherosclerosis, the buildup of plaque in the arteries that can lead to heart attacks. Additionally, depression can dysregulate the autonomic nervous system, leading to impaired heart rate variability, a condition strongly associated with increased cardiac risk. In other words, the heart literally beats differently in a depressed person, with rhythms that are less adaptable and more susceptible to stress-induced damage. Moreover, depression frequently coexists with lifestyle factors that exacerbate cardiovascular risk. People experiencing chronic depression are more likely to engage in behaviors such as smoking, poor dietary choices, physical inactivity, and irregular sleep patterns, all of which contribute to heart disease. The interplay between emotional state and behavior creates a feedback loop. Depressive symptoms reduce motivation for healthy behaviors, which in turn worsen physical health, further deepening the depression. This vicious cycle illustrates the inseparable connection between mind and body, showing that treating depression is as much about preserving the heart as it is about improving mood. Kay Redfield Jamieson, in her memoir, An Unquiet Mind, offers insights into how mood disorders, while primarily psychiatric in classification, manifest in tangible physiological ways. While her focus is often on bipolar disorder, the principle applies broadly. Disruptions in emotional regulation can trigger stress responses, hormonal imbalances, and neurochemical changes that place sustained strain on the heart. These biological effects, when combined with behavioral consequences of depression, help explain why clinical studies consistently find that individuals with major depressive disorder face a 1.5 to 2 times higher risk of developing coronary artery disease compared to non-depressed counterparts. Beyond the measurable biological and behavioral factors, there is a psychological dimension that intensifies the cardiovascular impact of depression. Irvin D. Yalom, in Existential Psychotherapy, explores how feelings of hopelessness, existential despair, and perceived meaninglessness can magnify psychological stress. In depressed individuals, these existential tensions do not remain confined to the mind. They ripple throughout the body, activating stress pathways that harm the cardiovascular system. Hopelessness, in particular, has been shown to be a strong predictor of future heart attacks, independent of other risk factors, highlighting the intricate interplay between mental state and physical outcomes. Clinical evidence further underscores the urgency of addressing depression as a cardiovascular risk factor. For example, studies have demonstrated that patients recovering from myocardial infarctions, who also suffer from depression, have higher rates of recurrent cardiac events and mortality than those without depressive symptoms. This suggests that mental health is not merely a supportive concern, but a critical component of cardiac recovery and prevention. Interventions targeting depression, whether through psychotherapy, pharmacological treatment, or integrated behavioral programs, can therefore serve as a form of heart disease prevention. In practice, the treatment of depression with an eye toward cardiovascular health requires a holistic approach. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, helps patients reframe negative thought patterns, reduce rumination, and develop adaptive coping strategies, all of which reduce physiological stress on the heart. Exercise, frequently recommended as an adjunct treatment for depression, simultaneously boosts mood-regulating neurotransmitters and improves cardiovascular fitness. John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness-based stress reduction programs also demonstrate measurable benefits, lowering blood pressure, heart rate, and stress hormone levels while alleviating depressive symptoms. By integrating psychological interventions with lifestyle and medical management, the heart and mind can begin a mutually supportive healing process. Ultimately, depression should never be underestimated as merely a mental or emotional burden. It is a condition that reaches deeply into the body, affecting heart function, systemic inflammation, and behavior in ways that can dramatically increase cardiovascular risk. Recognizing depression as a cardiovascular concern reframes both treatment and prevention. Addressing emotional well-being is inseparable from protecting the heart. As Solomon poignantly describes, depression is a persistent shadow that touches every aspect of life. Yet through awareness, therapeutic intervention, and lifestyle integration, it is possible to alleviate suffering and simultaneously safeguard the very organ that keeps us alive. By acknowledging and treating the heart-mind connection, we open the door to a healthier, more resilient life. Anxiety is often dismissed as a mental inconvenience, a series of worries or nervous habits that can be shrugged off with "just relax." Yet, beneath its intangible surface, anxiety exerts profound effects on the cardiovascular system, often silently damaging the heart over time. Unlike acute stress, which is temporary and generally manageable, chronic anxiety maintains the body in a persistent state of heightened arousal. This constant activation of the fight-or-flight response floods the body with stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, which elevate heart rate, constrict blood vessels, and increase blood pressure. Over years, this chronic strain can contribute to hypertension, arrhythmias, and even the development of coronary artery disease. K. Redfield Jameson, in An Unquiet Mind, provides vivid insights into the physiological manifestations of mood and anxiety disorders. While her primary focus is bipolar disorder, she also explores the pervasive impact of anxiety and panic on bodily systems. During panic episodes, the sympathetic nervous system, responsible for rapid reactions to danger, triggers intense cardiovascular responses, including palpitations, chest pain, and shortness of breath. For individuals experiencing repeated or persistent panic attacks, these reactions are not just distressing, they impose real stress on the heart, sometimes mimicking symptoms of cardiac disease. This intersection between psychological experience and physical reality highlights the inseparable connection between mind and heart. Research in cardiology supports this observation. Individuals with generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, or chronic panic disorders demonstrate higher levels of catecholamines, hormones that regulate heart rate and blood pressure. Sustained elevation of these chemicals increases the workload of the heart and accelerates the wear and tear process on arterial walls. Studies have found that anxiety is associated with a 26% increased risk of coronary heart disease, independent of traditional cardiovascular risk factors. This means that even if someone maintains a healthy diet, exercises regularly, and avoids smoking, persistent anxiety alone can elevate the risk of heart disease. Moreover, anxiety affects lifestyle behaviors in ways that indirectly harm cardiovascular health. Individuals with chronic anxiety often experience sleep disturbances, irregular eating patterns, and social withdrawal. Sleep deprivation alone has been shown to increase blood pressure and impair glucose metabolism, while irregular eating and social isolation can contribute to obesity, metabolic syndrome, and systemic inflammation, all of which further strain the heart. Irvin D. Yalom, in Existential Psychotherapy, emphasizes that internalized fears and unresolved existential anxieties exert physical consequences, demonstrating that the mind's unspoken worries can manifest as very real threats to bodily health. Panic attacks, in particular, provide a striking illustration of anxiety's impact on the heart. During a panic episode, the body reacts as if facing imminent danger. Heart rate spikes, blood pressure rises, and breathing becomes rapid and shallow. Over time, repeated panic attacks may contribute to long-term changes in heart rhythm and increased risk of arrhythmias. Furthermore, the fear of future attacks can itself create a feedback loop, perpetuating chronic anxiety and maintaining heightened cardiovascular strain. John Kabat-Zinn's mindfulness techniques, outlined in Wherever You Go, There You Are, demonstrate that conscious awareness of physiological sensations and mental patterns can reduce the frequency and intensity of panic episodes, simultaneously easing psychological distress and alleviating cardiac load. Anxiety also intersects with depression, compounding cardiovascular risk. Studies show that individuals experiencing both anxiety and depression have higher levels of systemic inflammation and are more likely to develop heart disease than those with either condition alone. This comorbidity creates a complex interplay of emotional, cognitive, and physiological stresses, underscoring the need for integrative approaches to mental health that consider both mood and anxiety symptoms. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and mindfulness-based interventions have demonstrated efficacy in reducing anxiety, improving emotional regulation, and even lowering biomarkers of cardiovascular stress, such as heart rate variability and cortisol levels. it is crucial to recognize that anxiety's threat to the heart is often silent. Unlike heart attacks, which provide acute symptoms and demand immediate attention, the strain of chronic anxiety accumulates gradually, sometimes over decades, until it precipitates more severe cardiovascular events. Yet awareness and early intervention can alter this trajectory. By addressing anxiety through therapy, lifestyle modifications, and mindfulness practices, individuals can break the cycle of physiological and psychological stress, protecting both mind and heart. This perspective reframes anxiety not as an abstract mental phenomenon, but as a tangible risk factor for one of the body's most vital organs. In conclusion, anxiety and panic disorders represent more than emotional discomfort. They are cardiovascular risk factors with measurable long-term consequences. Chronic activation of the stress response, disrupted sleep, lifestyle challenges, and comorbid mood disorders all contribute to a hidden strain on the heart. By acknowledging the silent power of anxiety and intervening with evidence-based strategies such as mindfulness, therapy, and lifestyle adjustments, individuals can reduce their risk of cardiovascular disease while also improving mental well-being. Understanding anxiety as both a psychological and physiological phenomenon bridges the divide between mind and body, emphasizing that true health requires attention to both. As Jameson reminds us, the mind's turmoil is inseparable from the body's responses, and through awareness and care, the silent burden on the heart can be lightened. Emotions are often dismissed as fleeting experiences that exist solely in the realm of thought and feeling. But decades of psychological and medical research demonstrate that emotions have profound, tangible effects on the cardiovascular system. The connection between emotional states and heart health is not merely metaphorical. Anger, grief, chronic worry, and even persistent joy all have measurable impacts on heart rate, blood pressure, and vascular function. Irvin D. Yalom, in Existential Psychotherapy, explores how unresolved existential anxieties and the human confrontation with mortality are not confined to the mind. They reverberate throughout the body, influencing physiological processes in ways that can either enhance or undermine cardiovascular health. The mind and heart are in constant dialogue, and understanding this connection is essential for both mental and physical well-being. One of the most compelling examples of the mind-body connection in action is the phenomenon known as stress cardiomyopathy, or broken heart syndrome. This condition, often triggered by extreme emotional stress, causes sudden weakening of the heart muscles, mimicking a heart attack in both symptoms and electrocardiogram findings, yet without the presence of blocked coronary arteries. Medical studies suggest that surges of stress hormones like adrenaline during moments of intense emotional upheaval can temporarily stun the heart, demonstrating that emotions alone have the power to disrupt cardiovascular function. Such cases underscore a critical principle. The emotional landscape is not abstract. It carries concrete physiological consequences. Chronic emotional states, such as persistent anger or unresolved grief, can lead to long-term cardiovascular strain. Research has shown that individuals who frequently experience anger or hostility have higher rates of hypertension and coronary artery disease. The mechanism is similar to that of chronic stress: sustained sympathetic nervous system activation, elevated cortisol levels, and increased systemic inflammation. Conversely, positive emotional states, social connection, and emotional resilience appear to exert protective effects on the heart. Studies on positive psychology indicate that individuals who cultivate optimism and gratitude experience lower levels of inflammatory markers and improved heart rate variability, suggesting that emotional regulation is a key determinant of cardiovascular health. Yalom's existential perspective adds depth to these findings by highlighting the role of meaning and self-awareness in emotional regulation. Individuals who avoid confronting difficult emotions or who live in denial of life's challenges may experience a buildup of internal tension that manifests physiologically. Rumination, chronic worry, and suppressed grief are not harmless mental patterns. They create a persistent activation of stress pathways that can elevate blood pressure, disrupt sleep, and contribute to endothelial dysfunction, the early stages of vascular disease. In essence, unprocessed emotions can act as silent drivers of cardiovascular damage over time. The psychosomatic nature of emotions extends to anxiety and depression as well, which often coexist with unresolved emotional conflicts. The physiological impact of these mental states, elevated cortisol, disrupted autonomic balance, and inflammatory responses, directly affects cardiovascular function. Jon Kabat-Zinn, in Full Catastrophe Living, emphasizes that mindfulness practices cultivate awareness of emotional states without judgment, allowing the nervous system to return to equilibrium. By observing emotions rather than suppressing them, individuals reduce the chronic activation of stress responses, which in turn benefits cardiovascular health. This approach highlights a practical application of the mind-body connection. Emotional awareness and processing are not optional. They are essential for protecting the heart. Furthermore, the mind-body connection is reinforced by studies linking social and emotional experiences to cardiovascular outcomes. Loneliness, social isolation, and chronic interpersonal stress have been shown to increase the risk of hypertension, myocardial infarction, and stroke. These findings suggest that the heart responds not only to internal emotional states, but also to the quality of relationships and social interactions. Positive social engagement, empathy, and supportive relationships can buffer the physiological effects of stress, demonstrating that emotional well-being is deeply intertwined with heart health. This reinforces the notion that psychological and social dimensions are inseparable from cardiovascular risk factors. In addition, early life emotional experiences can shape long-term heart health. Research in developmental psychology and psychocardiology indicates that childhood trauma, neglect, or prolonged emotional stress can sensitize the stress response system, creating lifelong vulnerability to hypertension and heart disease. Sapolsky, in Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, explains that chronic activation of stress pathways during formative years can recalibrate physiological responses, making individuals more reactive to emotional stress in adulthood. This interplay between past emotional experiences and present physiological function highlights the enduring nature of the mind-body connection and underscores the importance of emotional healing as a preventive strategy for cardiovascular disease. In conclusion, emotions are far more than mental experiences. They are active agents shaping the health of the heart. Chronic anger, grief, worry, and unresolved existential anxieties create sustained physiological stress that accelerates cardiovascular disease, while positive emotional states and social connection exert protective effects. By cultivating emotional awareness, processing difficult feelings, and embracing practices such as mindfulness and therapy, individuals can influence not only their mental well-being, but also the long-term health of their heart. Yalom's existential insights, combined with modern psychocardiology, reveal a simple yet profound truth. The heart and mind are inseparable, and caring for one inevitably nurtures the other. Recognizing and honoring this connection is not just a path to emotional clarity. It is a life-saving strategy for cardiovascular resilience. Mental health and lifestyle are intimately connected, and when it comes to cardiovascular health, the bridge between mind and behavior becomes especially significant. The way we think, feel, and respond to stress profoundly shapes the choices we make each day. What we eat, how we move, whether we sleep well, and even whether we engage socially. Chronic mental health challenges, such as depression, anxiety, and unresolved emotional distress, do more than affect mood. They influence behaviors that either protect or imperil the heart. John E. Sarno, in The Mind-Body Prescription, explores how psychological tension and repressed emotions manifest as physical illness, illustrating the ways in which emotional and cognitive patterns can dictate bodily outcomes. In the context of cardiovascular disease, mental health functions as both a warning system and a modifiable gateway. Improving psychological well-being can directly encourage heart-healthy behaviors. Research consistently shows that depression, anxiety, and chronic stress are linked to a range of lifestyle behaviors that increase cardiovascular risk. Individuals with depression often struggle to maintain regular physical activity, are more likely to engage in emotional eating, and may rely on substances such as alcohol or tobacco to cope with their emotional state. Anxiety and chronic worry can disrupt sleep patterns, creating hormonal imbalances and impairing glucose metabolism, further exacerbating cardiovascular risk. Even when individuals consciously attempt to make healthy choices, mental health challenges can create an invisible barrier to consistency and adherence, demonstrating that emotional wellness is foundational to behavioral change. The interconnection between mental health and lifestyle choices extends beyond negative behaviors. Positive mental health, emotional resilience, and effective stress management encourage habits that protect the heart. For example, individuals practicing mindfulness or cognitive behavioral strategies often report increased motivation to exercise, improved dietary patterns, and more consistent sleep schedules. Jon Kabat-Zinn, in Full Catastrophe Living, emphasizes that mindfulness cultivates awareness of daily habits, allowing individuals to recognize and interrupt automatic, self-destructive behaviors. By increasing emotional awareness, individuals gain the capacity to choose behaviors that align with long-term cardiovascular health rather than short-term emotional relief. Exercise serves as a particularly illustrative example of the mind-body connection. Regular physical activity is one of the most effective interventions for both mental and cardiovascular health. Studies show that exercise reduces symptoms of depression and anxiety, lowers cortisol levels, and improves heart rate variability, simultaneously mitigating physiological stress and improving mood. In essence, moving the body not only strengthens the cardiovascular system, but also rewires the brain to respond more adaptively to emotional challenges. Sarno and other mind-body researchers emphasize that recognizing the psychological drivers of sedentary behavior or avoidance is essential. Addressing the mental barriers enables the heart-protective benefits of consistent activity to take hold. Nutrition, too, is influenced by mental health. Chronic stress and emotional distress can trigger cravings for high-calorie, sugar-laden foods that offer temporary relief but contribute to weight gain, insulin resistance, and systemic inflammation, all risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Conversely, individuals who cultivate emotional regulation and mindfulness are better able to maintain balanced diets, make intentional choices, and recognize the cues that drive unhealthy eating. The awareness of emotional triggers is essential. Eating becomes a conscious, heart-supportive behavior rather than an automatic response to mood fluctuations. Positive mental health creates a feedback loop where healthier lifestyle choices reinforce emotional well-being, and emotional stability encourages further protective behaviors. social engagement and support also play a crucial role in linking mental health to heart wellness. Chronic loneliness, social withdrawal, and poor quality relationships are associated with increased cardiovascular risk, while meaningful connections buffer the effects of stress and promote healthy lifestyle choices. Yalom's existential psychology underscores that humans are inherently relational, and emotional health flourishes in the context of social support. By nurturing relationships, individuals not only enhance psychological resilience, but also reinforce behaviors such as shared physical activity, collective healthy eating, and adherence to medical advice, indirectly strengthening heart health. Sleep, often overlooked, is another critical bridge between mental health and cardiovascular wellness. Poor sleep quality, insomnia, and irregular sleep patterns are strongly correlated with anxiety, depression, and chronic stress. Sleep deprivation elevates blood pressure, impairs glucose metabolism, and increases inflammation, creating a direct link to heart disease. By addressing underlying mental health challenges, individuals are more likely to achieve restorative sleep, reducing both emotional and physiological stress. Mindfulness, cognitive therapy, and stress management interventions all play a role in improving sleep quality, further illustrating the synergistic relationship between mental well-being and heart health. Ultimately, lifestyle choices are never made in isolation. They are profoundly influenced by the state of the mind. By prioritizing mental health, individuals gain the awareness, motivation, and resilience necessary to adopt behaviors that protect the cardiovascular system. This perspective reframes lifestyle interventions. Diet, exercise, sleep, and social engagement are not just external prescriptions, but reflections of internal psychological states. Mental health is the gateway, and by cultivating emotional and cognitive well-being, individuals unlock the capacity for sustained, heart-protective behaviors. The research and insights from Sarno, Kabat-Zinn, and Yalom converge on a clear message. Caring for the mind is inseparable from caring for the heart, and the habits that preserve cardiovascular health are rooted in emotional awareness, self-regulation, and intentional living. The connection between mental health and cardiovascular disease is now well established, and the question arises, what can be done to actively intervene and protect both the mind and the heart? Integrative approaches offer a holistic solution, recognizing that healing is not merely about treating symptoms, but addressing the underlying interplay between psychological and physiological processes. By combining mindfulness, psychotherapy, lifestyle interventions, and social support, these approaches treat mental and cardiovascular health as inseparable, emphasizing that emotional well-being is essential to heart health. John Kabat-Zinn's Wherever You Go, There You Are, and John E. Sarno's The Mind-Body Prescription provide a foundation for understanding how awareness, acceptance, and conscious emotional engagement can translate into tangible cardiovascular benefits. Mindfulness-based interventions have become a cornerstone of integrative cardiovascular care. Chronic stress, depression, and anxiety all create persistent sympathetic nervous system activation, elevating heart rate and blood pressure and promoting systemic inflammation. Mindfulness practices cultivate present moment awareness, helping individuals recognize and interrupt habitual reactions to stress and negative emotions. Studies have shown that regular mindfulness practice reduces cortisol levels, lowers blood pressure, and improves heart rate variability, while simultaneously alleviating anxiety and depressive symptoms. These physiological and psychological improvements highlight the profound capacity of mental training to heal the heart indirectly but powerfully. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, offers another effective strategy. By helping individuals reframe maladaptive thought patterns, CBT reduces emotional distress, improves coping mechanisms, and diminishes the physiological burden of chronic stress. For example, Individuals who learn to reinterpret perceived threats or setbacks experience lower cortisol responses and reduced sympathetic activation, directly benefiting cardiovascular function. Research demonstrates that patients participating in CBT programs show decreased incidence of hypertension and improved management of existing heart conditions, illustrating that cognitive restructuring has measurable effects beyond the mind and into the body. Exercise, often prescribed for cardiovascular prevention, serves a dual role in integrative approaches. Physical activity strengthens the heart, improves circulation, and reduces inflammation, while simultaneously producing endorphins and neurotransmitter changes that alleviate depression and anxiety. Combining exercise with mindfulness or psychotherapy amplifies these effects, fostering a holistic intervention that addresses both emotional and physical health. As Sarno emphasizes, recognizing the psychological drivers of behavior, including avoidance, fear, and unresolved emotional tension, enables individuals to sustain exercise habits and other lifestyle interventions, enhancing the efficacy of cardiovascular prevention programs. Social support is equally critical. Loneliness, isolation, and poor quality relationships have been consistently linked to increased cardiovascular risk, while strong, supportive connections buffer stress and promote adherence to heart-healthy behaviors. Integrative approaches often incorporate community, group therapy, or family involvement, recognizing that emotional and social well-being reinforces behavioral and physiological health. Yalom's existential framework underscores the importance of human connection in psychological resilience, emphasizing that relationships serve as both a protective factor and a conduit for behavioral consistency, ultimately benefiting the heart. Nutrition and sleep are also integral to integrative care. Mindfulness-based eating encourages attention to hunger and satiety cues, emotional triggers, and food quality, improving dietary choices that support cardiovascular health. Likewise, interventions addressing stress, anxiety, or depression enhance sleep quality, which in turn reduces cortisol levels, improves blood pressure regulation, and lowers systemic inflammation. By attending simultaneously to emotional regulation, behavioral patterns, and physiological outcomes, integrative approaches create a synergistic effect where improvements in one domain reinforce progress across others. Ultimately, healing the heart by healing the mind is not a theoretical concept. It is a practical, evidence-based approach to reducing cardiovascular risk and enhancing overall well-being. By integrating mindfulness, psychotherapy, exercise, social support, nutrition, and sleep management, individuals can address the root causes of emotional and physiological stress, transforming both mental and heart health. The convergence of research and clinical practice demonstrates that interventions targeting the mind through awareness, emotional processing, and behavioral regulation have measurable effects on heart function, blood pressure, inflammation, and long-term cardiovascular outcomes. The overarching lesson is clear: mental health and cardiovascular health are inseparable. Addressing only one domain provides incomplete protection, while holistic integrative strategies cultivate resilience in both mind and body. Individuals empowered with mindfulness, cognitive strategies, and supportive relationships experience not only emotional relief, but also tangible reductions in heart disease risk. As Kabat-Zinn and Sarno suggest, and as supported by psychocardiology research, the path to a healthier heart begins with conscious engagement with the mind. By actively nurturing mental well-being, individuals can create a life that is not only emotionally fulfilling, but physiologically protective, achieving true integration between mind and heart. If you found this video eye-opening, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more insights on the hidden connections between mind and body. Share your thoughts in the comments, Have you noticed how your mental health affects your heart? Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video packed with science-backed strategies to protect both your mind and your heart. Your journey to total well-being starts here, and together we'll uncover the secrets no one ever told you about staying healthy from the inside out.